Hey you guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin'. Today we're talking about where bass go in the summer and how to catch them. Summer is a great time to be out fishing. The fish's metabolisms are really high because the water is warm. So the fish are active, they're moving, they're feeding, and you can catch them. They're also extremely predictable when it gets really hot. All in all, summer is an amazing time to be out on the water fishing. You don't want to miss this period of the year. Now, with that said, if you don't understand how these fish position in summer, it can be miserable. You can be out there fishing all day long, cooking in the heat, and never even run into a fish. So what I want to do today is really help you understand whether you're in a highland reservoir, a lowland reservoir, a natural lake, a river, wherever you are, I want to help you understand where your fish have gone, how you can get ahead of them, and then I'll give you a handful of key confidence baits that will help you catch them. So right off the bat, here's what we know about bass in the summer. After bass spawn, they back out a little bit and they recuperate for a few weeks. That's the beginning of the post-spawn. After that, we go into the full post-spawn, which ultimately transitions to summer patterns. As we go through the post-spawn, the fish divide, and they stay divided all the way through summer. So a portion of the fish in your lake, after they spawned, they backed out, a portion of them went back up shallow. The remainder of them went out deeper. Now, how many went one way or the other? That depends on your lake. The more shallow cover your lake has, the more of those fish that will remain up shallow. I get asked all the time, hey, I hear you talk about fishing grass, but my lake only has a tiny bit of grass. Will the bass really be up there? Absolutely, they'll be up there. But the number of them will be proportionate to how much cover there is available to them. The rest of the fish will go out deeper. So if your lake is clearer, doesn't have a lot of cover, it's generally a more sterile environment. When you look in the water, you don't see a whole lot of fish. The vast majority of those fish have pulled out. They're on offshore structure. We'll get to that in a minute. So let's talk about where these fish would position in these different styles of lakes. Okay, so highland reservoirs. A short version of what a highland reservoir is. You've got a dam, obviously it's a reservoir. Highland reservoirs tend to be steeper. If they'll have a lot of small secondary points going back in arms. So a lot of big arms that run back up. Because it is steeper, you end up with these little canyons. So you'll tend to have longer arms. You'll tend to have a lot of secondary points on those arms. And then on the main body, you might have long tapering points. Typically clearer water, but not necessarily. Typically less cover, but not necessarily. Lowland reservoirs, conversely, tend to have a much larger dam on them because they're flatter overall, so it takes a bigger dam to hold the water. They may even have a dam in more than one place on the lake to contain the water. They tend to be much shallower, have a lot more rolling offshore contour, so a lot more humps, a lot of points that will go out and meander. It might have multiple high spots on the same point. And while they may have arms in them that go back, they don't have as many and they tend to not go as far. And then those arms that break off of the main body tend to not have as many secondary points. There might be a few points, some pockets, shallow flats in the back, but you tend to not have secondary points stacked for miles going back up an arm like you do on a highland reservoir. Natural lakes, they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, but without a dam on them, they tend to have very little water fluctuation. So many of them will get good grass and cover in them, but not all. In the north, natural lakes tend to have long shallows before they fall into the main body of the lake. In the south, you don't really see that. In the south, you might just have a big shallow bowl. It might have a little bit of shape to it, but not a lot of sheer transition like some of the northern lakes do. A lot more slow sloping transitions. Pond guys, you tend to fall in terms of pattern with natural lakes. Your fish are going to behave like those fish. And really, the actual definition of a pond, I don't know if you know this, because some things that I would consider a lake are in fact categorized as a pond. A pond is any body of water where light penetrates all the way to bottom on the entire lake. So it might be 300 acres, but if light makes it all the way to the bottom everywhere, that's a pond. If it's a little tiny one, but it's a deep canyon, really you would actually call that a reservoir. But most people would just call it a pond. And then rivers, creeks, anywhere that you've got flow, fish in those places are going to position a little bit differently. So again, let's back up and let's talk about this. So highland reservoirs, if you've got cover, there will be fish shallow. I'm gonna cover up, it's pretty hot out here. There will be fish up in those shadows, up in that cover. If there's grass in the backs of coves, it might not be every cove. You might, 1 out of every 15 coves has a little bit of grass in the back. Those fish will be there. If you've got laydowns, logs laying out into the lake, there will be fish there. If you have marina docks, I am telling you, there are fish there. But the majority of your fish, they've backed out. Now they haven't necessarily gone deep, but they've gone out. They've gone to the main lake. They will be on the largest main lake points. They'll be on humps. They'll be on that offshore structure. If you've got rock piles, they're on rock piles. But the biggest piece of cover, if you will, it's not cover, is the color line. If you are in a highland reservoir, you need to understand how the color line works, because your fish are revolving around it and you are probably not fishing for them. If you're on a highland reservoir, clearer water, and you spend all your time just going down the bank aimlessly fishing, you are a normal bass fisherman. That is what most people do. So don't feel bad about that. That's what most people do. But you need to change. And here is why. When you look up at the bank on any lake, not just a highland reservoir, on any lake, when I look right up tight to shore, the water is a lighter color because I'm seeing the bottom. If I look out at the main lake, the water is a darker color because it's open water and it's deep. So, sort of a tan up here, deep blue out there. Somewhere in between the two, the tan will fade and it meets the darker color. Right there on that line, that is the color line. The color line is the transition where light is no longer penetrating and hitting bottom. So below that line, outside that line, there's darkness down there. Your fish will use that line as if it is the bank. And on one lake, that line may be in 5 feet of water because your water's murky. So the color line, light penetration, it's right up by the shore. On a crystal clear lake, 20, 30, 40, 50 feet of visibility, that line can be way out over deep water. It doesn't matter where it is. In summer, your bass are using the color line. You need to fish it. You fish it parallel, right down the color line, as if I was up here casting along the bank. You can throw top water on the color line. You can crank, you can swim bait. You can take a Senko, throw it out there in 40 feet of water on the color line and let it start to sink. Because the fish that use the color line move up and down. Sometimes they're on the bottom, but a lot of times they're suspended. So it might seem silly to throw a Senko in 40 feet of water, weightless. But you'll find that those fish are actually only 10 to 15 feet down, and they have no problem shooting straight up to eat that Senko, or straight up to eat a topwater. The color line is a major player for you this time of year. Now, lowland reservoir guys, you tend to have a lot more cover in the water. Not always, but again, you tend to. Tends to be a lot more grass. A lot of times lowland reservoirs will get a lot of brush in them because the water will drop and there's so much shallow that a lot of it will come out and start to grow brush on it, and that water will come back up and flood it. So there tends to be a lot of cover. So lowland reservoirs, more fish will stay shallow and will stay in the cover. Again, you're wanting to fish cover. If you've got docks, marinas, the fish use them. If you've got humps that are hard bottom and you've got another hump that has grass or wood on it, they're on the one with the wood. They like to take the best spots. The biggest fish take the best spots. So maybe you have reeds on your shoreline. If you've got 500 yards of reeds, and in those reeds, there's one patch of hyacinth or some other weed growing, they'll take that spot that's different. The biggest fish on that entire run will be right on that spot that's different. Or maybe there's a laydown that's blown in there. They'll be on the laydown in the reeds. They love to be on those things that are different. They take the very best spots. They use the most overhead cover available to them. And then the smaller fish take whatever is left over. Natural lakes, it can go either way. Depending on what I've described, more cover, less cover, just take that reservoir information and apply it to your lake. Remember, for you, everything is downsized. So a fish that's moved offshore in a city park, she might have gone from sitting right up on the bank, she's backed out there a cast length, and she's sitting on a trash can that somebody rolled into the water 5 years ago. But she will be sitting up against a piece of cover. Those shallower natural lakes, they will sit right against cover to do their hunting. Deeper natural lakes, they'll sit on the color line every time. And then fish that are in current. Your fish, this time of year, their metabolisms are so high, they're not afraid of the current. You'll find them at the heads of pools. You'll find them right where that fast water comes down. In any river, you've got fast water and pools, fast water and pools. They'll sit right at the top of the pools, right up in there in the very first current break that they can get, and they'll feed aggressively. So you're still looking for current breaks, but don't be afraid for that current break to be right up tight to fast current. They're not sitting in the middle of the pool down deep. That's not where they are. They're right up at the head of it, right where that fast water is. When you have fast water, maybe it's white water coming down, it depends on your river. Say you got white water coming down and then there's a laydown, it creates just a tiny eddy. They'll be in that first eddy next to that fastest water. And it's amazing, they will pile in there. That one little pocket of calm water might have 20 bass in it, just waiting for the opportunity to jump out and feed. It can be really fun. Again, this time of year, these fish get predictable. They'll be in that eddy, they'll be under docks, they'll be right on the color line. So I don't need to worry about fishing a ton of stuff way out deep. I don't need to fish a ton of stuff way up shallow. I fish right on my color line. If I'm fishing cover, they're on the best pieces of cover. It makes it incredibly simple. The best thing about this pattern is that this is going to last for a long time. You get to run this pattern for several months where these fish are incredibly predictable. Now, as far as baits go, you can catch them on fast moving baits. You can catch them on slow moving baits. And there are times where you're going to need both. But I just grabbed a handful of just general confidence baits for me. If you are a guy in crystal clear water, maybe this frog isn't for you, right? You can alternate in, put a popper in instead. We just did a video, top 5 baits in July. And in fact, I will link that because here I'm gonna give you some sort of quick answers, but I'll link that because in that one, I'll talk about this exact frog, but I'll give you an alternate topwater. I'll talk about this crankbait, but I'll give you an alternate bait if your water's clearer. But here we go. Topwater, number 1. It can be amazing. July, middle of summer, heat of the day is my favorite frog fishing of the entire year. Don't get caught in that you can only throw topwater early and late in the day fallacy. You can catch them all day long, and in fact, can get the best bites in the dead heat of the day, the middle of the day. The difference is early and late in the day, fish will tend to move up and roam shallow to feed in low light. And that's why people tend to get topwater bites, because there's fish up moving around. Once that sun gets up, it takes a little while for those fish to reposition, but they'll suck in tight to cover. We just talked about where. And you can take a topwater and throw it right to where that fish is, and that fish will eat. You take a frog and you put it right on that one clump of grass that's mixed into a field of a different kind of grass, and the giant that's under there is coming up for that frog. It's a really fun way to catch them. Moving baits. The two main players, one's going to be that deep diving crankbait. Lowland reservoirs, not as much as Highland reservoirs. So lowland reservoirs, I would go down to like a 6XD. You probably don't need to get quite as deep. Highland reservoirs, where deep water is a player, that color line is out deeper, I'm throwing an Azuma 22. This is the Azuma Z-Boss 22. It's a bait I have a ton of confidence in. Again, I'm going to link that other video because I have alternates depending on what kind of lake you're on. So you'll want to check that out too. My other fast moving bait, this is hands down my favorite way to fish in the post spawn, and it carries over through summer because I get really big bites on it. But this is a swing head jig or a wobble head jig, free swinging jig head with a swimming creature bait. If I need to get a giant bite in summer, that's my bait in the June bug color specifically. If I just want to catch fish, I throw green pumpkins. If I want to catch a giant, I throw June bug. So make no mistake, this is a creature bait, but this is a fast moving bait. Think crankbait, spinnerbait, chatterbait. Throw it out, let it hit the bottom, and then you just start reeling, and it'll just bounce and work its way along the bottom, and those fish will crush it. This is a moving bait. And then two slow moving baits for you. First one is the shaky head. Again, I spend the majority of my time focused around June bug. But the clearer your water, the more I lean to the green pumpkins. But my main gig is June bug in the summertime. And then the last bait is a Senko. Little 5-inch Senko, just flat, catches fish all summer long. I can Texas rig it and throw it in cover, or I can wacky rig it like this, fish it on lighter line in clearer water. I can throw a Senko on the color line. I can skip it under a dock, or I can throw it right up in the heavy cover against the bank, and it will catch fish in all of those situations. Down in the video description, I'm going to link these exact baits, my favorite colors and sizes for each one, the hooks I use to rig them, so that you can fish with confidence. And I'll also link that other video where I go in depth on baits in July, because those July baits will continue to carry forward through the remainder of summer and be a big factor as well. Guys, you can catch a ton of fish in the summertime. You can do this. It's hot, but that hot is working for you. Now that you know where the fish are and how they position, the heat is a good thing. The heat, while it makes people run and hide in the shade, it does the same thing to the fish. And you now know exactly where they are, and you can go straight there and get them. You don't have to worry about the miles of water in between. It's an awesome opportunity to catch a lot of fish and to catch a really big fish. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.